I want to talk about power of consistency. Power of consistency. So now, Christy, you and I have known each other for a long time. You knew me when I was involved in wrestling. Like you knew I was a wrestler. I think you were a basketball player, wrestling,
Volleyball.
volleyball. Yep. So wrestling was a big thing for me. And since then, I actually was involved as a referee. So I referee wrestling as well. And if you're familiar with some of the things with refereeing, I remember one particular year, it was early on in my refereeing career, when I had a coach who came up to me and he gave me what was, at first I took it as like a a double-sided, like one of those compliments that you were like, is this really a compliment or was the shade being thrown? But basically, in wrestling, you have, especially when both wrestlers are in a neutral position, they're both standing up and they're trying to go for the takedown. If it comes to a point where it appears that one wrestler is really not trying to do anything, is just kind of, especially if the match goes long, it seems like they're just trying to breathe or whatever have you, you call it's called stalling. It's a technical violation. Typically, the other wrestler gets 1 point. But the thing about stall calls is that stall calls are very subjective in that as a official, it's my judgment that determines whether or not it's a stall. So of course, especially in heated matches, the coaches on the other end of it, because of their point of view, of course, you never can call that, you never can make that call too quickly, or you sometimes need to make it depending on, what side of the coin you're on. And there was one particular coach who came up to me and he said, I'm going to tell you something, and I hope you take this the right way. He said, I was not a fan of how you were making, some of your calls. He said, but then I stood back, and it was a tournament. So he stood back. He said, I just had the opportunity just to watch you in action. And he said, one thing I have to tell you is that I really appreciate how you're consistent in your stall calls. And I was like, whoa, he was like, look, I may not like it, but at the same time, he's doing it. It's clear that you actually have a system that you're going by. It's clear that you have a standard by which you're applying, and it's clear that you have a skill. Like you know what it is that you're doing, right? And he says, so whether or not I agree with it, I like it, it doesn't matter because I saw all across the board you had something that you were doing and you weren't just doing willy-nilly. And I really appreciated that, and that kind of sticks to me a little bit when it comes to the idea of how do we apply that principle of consistency in our lives. Most successful people will tell you either in their words or actions about the importance of consistency. As a matter of fact, this morning I posted on Facebook a quotation by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He said, success isn't always about greatness, it's about consistency. Consistent hard work leads to success. Greatness will come. And I really appreciated that because, The Rock Johnson, I mean, you can look at him and see he's been consistent, right?
Yeah.
He definitely has been consistent in his workouts. He was consistent in the development of his career. I mean, not too many contemporary actors, I mean, people who are still, like, very relevant in the game, get a TV show about their lives. Like, think about that. Like, typically, if you get a TV show about your life, you're dead or you're old, right? But, I mean, he's neither. And he's still relevant. I mean, he's still acting. He still gets a check from different Hollywood studios and different things. But yet, you can see that there's been a level of consistency. So when it comes to consistency, I think The Rock kind of, he kind of can tell us about it, right?
Sure.
So with that being said, I think back to all the different times I started something but didn't follow through with it. You ever done that, Christy?
More times than I care to admit.
And one of the things that I always think about is how, man, I did these things, and if I had just stayed consistent for a few months, the pain of it all may have been over because I didn't work through it. Right? How many times did I start a diet or an eating plan, right? And then after, because of lack of willpower, lack of discipline, getting stressed out from whatever, I just kind of threw it all away. And then I'm sitting 6 months later like, man, if I had just endured it for seriously, if I had just endured it for 6 months, how much further along I could have been. And I think everybody listening could probably think about that to some degree about, man, what are some areas in my life where I really could just be more consistent in. And so there are three principles I want to make sure I leave with you all this morning. The first one is consistency allows for practice. Practice makes perfect. Simone Biles, she was just interviewed on the Today Show. You know her. I mean, she's a very famous U.S. gymnastics, women gymnastics, what do you call them, participant, athlete. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that they were asking her about is about her practice schedule. And I think she said something like Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, she practices 7 hours. Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, she practices 4 hours. And then Sunday, she's off, right? And they were kind of joking like, oh, she's very biblical there. On the seventh day, she rested, right? Uh-huh. But, I mean, let's face it. First of all, she has how many Olympic gold medals? Like gold medals. Gold. And not even just a team one, but individual.
Yes.
Right? She has maneuvers and moves and different types of routines that named after her.
No one else can do.
And she said, this is what she said. She said, and there is one that she's going to be unveiling this weekend at the World Championships or something. Mm-hmm. Like, well, maybe not this weekend, but soon, right? And so, I mean, that's a great example of what happens. Consistency allows for practice. Here's the second thing. Consistency prepares for the future. Habits are formed. Depending on who you ask, they say between 27 to about 50 days, right? That habits are formed depending on who you ask. And when you get used to performing those habits, all of a sudden, things start happening because now they become a part of your routine. They become a part of how you do things. And here's the third one. Consistency attracts possibilities. Consistency attracts possibilities. What I like to say is you keep being consistent with something, all of a sudden what it does is it unlocks different doors. I think about, in my former life, and I say former before COVID, traveling a lot, you get elite status with an airline or with a hotel, right? And what happens with elite status, all of a sudden you start getting benefits and perks that you didn't normally get, right? Like all of a sudden you find out there's another phone line that if you need to make a change to your reservation, you can call that number. It's not as, you get a lot more privileges.
Access.
You get more, access. You get access to, that's good, thank you. You're doing this one today. And so there are possibilities that come along with consistency. You keep on over time, you get to increase that access. So with that being said, one of the things I just want to encourage you all is to recognize the power of consistency. Remember, consistency allows for practice, it prepares for the future, and it attracts possibilities.
That's good, Mike.